Han, a young 23-year-old woman with a petite frame, carries within her an unyielding determination. Her bright eyes seem to hold grand dreams, yet upon closer look, a hint of worry lingers, as if the burdens on her small shoulders have never once been lifted. Leaving behind her impoverished village, Han carried only an old backpack, a few worn-out clothes, and a letter from her mother, reminding her, "Live well, my child. Never do anything that would bring you shame. We may not be wealthy, but you will always be my pride." Before her, the magnificent city unfolded with towering skyscrapers, hurried crowds, and dazzling lights, so vastly different from the humble village she had known all her life. Yet beneath this glamour lay a harsh reality that she quickly came to understand. Upon arrival, she found herself standing at a bustling intersection, clutching the small piece of paper with her boarding address tightly in her palm, a tiny suitcase by her side. The blaring horns and hurried footsteps made her feel lost amidst the never-ending rush of the city. The rented room she secured was hidden deep within a narrow, dimly lit and damp alley. Inside, there was little. Just an old bed, a wooden table with a broken leg propped up by a brick, and a flickering yellow light bulb that barely managed to stay lit. On her first nights in the city, Han curled up on her creaky bed, listening to the sound of passing cars and the distant laughter echoing from the alleyway. Her heart felt heavy, half wanting to cry, half reminding herself to stay strong for her parents and little sister waiting back home. Life in the city began at 5 a.m. each day. Han woke up to the icy breeze seeping through the poorly sealed window, hurriedly prepared herself, packed some leftover rice from the previous night's dinner for breakfast, and rushed to work at a small coffee shop. The cafe wasn't particularly busy, but the demanding owner insisted on perfection in every detail. Han learned how to brew coffee neither too strong nor too weak, wiped down tables until not a speck of dust remained, and greeted every customer with a smile, even when they didn't bother to acknowledge her. During the cold winter days, her hands turned red from the biting chill, yet she forced herself to keep smiling as she served coffee to customers. She wasn't afraid of hardship or exhaustion, even though her meager wages were barely enough to cover rent and simple meals. Every penny she saved was split into 2 portions, one sent back home, the other to sustain her life in the city. Each time she sent money, she received a letter from her mother in return. Simple words filled with boundless love. They became the strength that kept her moving forward. "I've received it, my child. Don't worry too much about me and your little sister. Take care of yourself and remember to eat properly." Every night after work, Han would sit on her bed, quietly gazing at an old, faded family photo. She gently reached out to touch the image. Her mother's warm smile, her father's silent presence, and her little sister clutching her school bag. "I will do my best. As long as Mom, Dad, and my sister stay healthy, I fear nothing," she whispered, as if sending a promise back home. Yet deep down, she knew the road ahead would not be easy. Her daily commute had become a familiar part of life, yet it was also a dynamic canvas, constantly changing. On chilly mornings, as the city slowly stirred awake, she walked along the crowded streets, where the sounds of honking cars, delivery calls, and cheerful chatter blended into a chaotic symphony of urban life. She never lingered for long on that path, her steps steady, her gaze merely skimming past the brightly lit stores and steaming food stalls. But one day, her eyes stopped at a small corner she had never noticed before. There, beside an old weathered utility pole, sat a frail elderly woman, huddled in a thin coat, barely enough to shield her from the morning cold. Beside the old woman was a tattered basket containing a few miscellaneous items that Han couldn't quite make out. She didn't extend her hand for money, nor did she call out to passers-by like the other beggars Han had encountered. She simply sat there, her head slightly bowed, her clouded eyes gazing into an undefined space, as if listening to something from the past. Han suddenly halted, an inexplicable feeling rising in her chest, as though she had just glimpsed something that didn't quite belong to the hurried world around her. She stood still for a few seconds, silently observing the old woman. Behind her, shop fronts glowed brightly, and people bustled about, yet no one seemed to notice her. No one stopped. Han wondered, how long has she been sitting here? What thoughts filled her mind to give her such sorrowful eyes? And how can she remain so silent amidst all this noise and chaos? But the flow of people behind her urged her forward. She turned back one last time before stepping onto the street leading to the coffee shop where she worked. That entire day, the image of the elderly woman lingered in Han's mind. In those faded eyes, she saw something deep, something that was neither resignation nor despair, but rather an unspoken sorrow, a story waiting to be heard. That night, when she returned to her small rented room, Han couldn't stop thinking about the old woman. She sat on her creaky bed, holding a bowl of cold rice from lunch. The dim yellow light cast a faint glow on the family photo she had placed on the table, but her mind was focused solely on the sorrowful eyes of the elderly woman. Han set the bowl down, a thought weighing on her heart. Is there something Anything I can do to help her feel a little warmer tomorrow? The next morning she woke up earlier than usual. She prepared a small loaf of bread, carefully wrapped in a clean paper bag. It was all she could afford with what she had, but she believed that even this small gesture might be enough to let the old woman know that someone cared. As she reached the familiar street corner, she saw the woman still sitting there, curled up in the same posture. The morning wind swept through her silver hair, making her shiver slightly. Han paused, her heartbeat quickening. She stepped forward slowly, crouched down, and gently placed the loaf of bread into the woman's hands. "Grandma, please have this. It's cold outside. You need to take care of yourself." Han spoke, her voice trembling slightly. The old woman looked up, her clouded eyes meeting Han's gaze. In that moment, she felt as if she had been drawn into another world, a world where gratitude and emotions need no words to be understood. The old woman's eyes flickered with surprise, then immediately softened with emotion. Her frail, trembling hands lifted the loaf of bread as if she couldn't believe it was real. "Thank you, child. Thank you so much," she said, her hoarse voice quivering, each word sinking deep into Han's heart. She said nothing more, but her eyes conveyed everything. Han smiled gently, her gaze as if to say, "It's all right, Grandma. Please eat." She stood there for a few seconds, watching as the old woman carefully unwrapped the paper bag and took a bite of the bread. Then she quietly turned away, quickening her steps to make it to work on time. That day, Han felt a lightness in her heart. The struggles at work, the worries about money, all seemed so small compared to that moment when the old woman had looked up at her with eyes full of gratitude. Amidst this grand and indifferent city, an invisible bond had formed between her, a young woman fighting for survival, and the elderly woman, someone carrying the burdens of a painful past. But Han had no idea that from that day forward, she and the old woman had stepped into each other's lives in a way she could never have expected. From that day on, Han began each morning with a new routine, preparing food for Grandma Min. Sometimes it was a small loaf of bread, other times a portion of leftover rice from the night before, or just a quick pack of sticky rice bought on the way. But no matter what it was, Han always took great care, as if she were wrapping a piece of her heart into it. The street corner where Grandma Min sat gradually became a familiar stop, a place Han always visited before heading to the coffee shop. At first, Grandma Min would only bow her head and quietly accept the food, her frail hands trembling as she held the package, as if afraid it would disappear. "Thank you, child. I really don't know what to say. You're so kind," she said, her hoarse voice filled with emotion. Even so, she kept her distance, eating in silence, as if afraid of troubling the young girl. But as time passed, she slowly began to open up. On chilly mornings, as Han sat beside her, Grandma Min started sharing small stories about her life. "I used to be a literature teacher at a high school," she said, a flicker of pride in her eyes. She loved her job. Every time she stood at the podium, looking at her students' attentive faces, she felt that her life had true meaning. She paused, her clouded eyes drifting toward the hurried crowds passing by. Grandma Min fell silent for a moment, then let out a sigh, her voice lowering. But then everything changed. "My husband passed away early. My son no longer cared about me. He said I was a burden, that I was unnecessary. So I left, not wanting to be a burden to anyone anymore." Her words tightened something in Han's heart. She looked at the frail shoulders of the old woman, hunched as if carrying an unbearable weight of sorrow. But Han did not ask further. She simply sat there in silence because she understood there are pains that, once spoken, only make the wounds deeper. She let Grandma Min speak at her own pace, allowing her to share without pressure. Each morning, as Han placed the food package in her hands, she was met with heartfelt words of gratitude, sometimes accompanied by a gentle smile, one she had never seen on anyone else before. Despite her hardships, Grandma Min carried a rare sense of calm, a quiet dignity that Han deeply admired. One day, as the cold winds blew through the city, Han brought her a bowl of hot porridge. Grandma Min looked at it, her eyes welling up with tears. "A bowl of hot porridge? How long has it been since I last had one? Thank you, child. Thank you so much." Her voice trembled. Han gazed at her, feeling a lump rise in her throat. She never imagined that something as simple as a bowl of porridge could bring such immense joy. On cold winter days, seeing Grandma Min huddled in her thin coat, Han couldn't bear it. She decided to set aside a small portion of her meager salary to buy her a woolen scarf. As she gently wrapped the scarf around Grandma Min's neck, Han softly said, "Stay warm, Grandma. Don't let yourself get cold anymore." Grandma Min took the scarf, her frail hands trembling as she stroked the soft threads. "You are so kind. I don't even know how to thank you enough." Every word she spoke, every glance she gave, touched Han's heart deeply. She realized that she wasn't just helping Grandma Min, she was also receiving invaluable lessons from her. She learned to appreciate the little things, to understand that even the simplest acts of kindness could soothe the deepest sorrows. Those brief mornings with Grandma Min had become the most meaningful moments of Han's day. She no longer dwelt on her own struggles, the constant worries about money or the future. Instead, she thought of Grandma Min's smile, the gentle look in her eyes when receiving the small meals, and the warmth that filled her heart each time she walked away. Yet even so, deep inside, Han always wondered, what had Grandma Min been through? How could someone who once stood in a classroom, once loved and respected, end up like this? And was there anything more she could do for Grandma Min? These questions clung to Han like an unanswered burden, lingering in her thoughts. One morning, as the faint sunlight dried the last traces of water on the pavement, Han, like every day, walked to the familiar street corner, carrying a small loaf of bread carefully wrapped. She saw Grandma Min still sitting there, curled up in the same posture, wrapped in a thin scarf that barely provided warmth. Han smiled softly, placing the food in front of her, and gently said, "Grandma, please have this to ease your hunger." But before she could hear a response, a loud voice suddenly rang out from behind, making her jump. "Han, what do you think you're doing?" She turned around, her hands still frozen midair. It was the coffee shop owner. His face flushed red, eyes filled with anger. He stormed toward her, each step heavy as if crushing any defense she could offer. "Do you think you can just take food from the shop and give it to beggars on the street? Do you know how bad that makes the business look? This is a commercial area. What will the customers think?" His voice was so loud that passers-by stopped to glance in curiosity. Han felt paralyzed, caught between embarrassment and an aching pain in her chest. "Sir, I only gave her my own food, not from the shop." "I'm sorry." Her voice trailed off, barely above a whisper. "I don't care. I don't ever want to see you do this again. Next time I catch you, you're fired," the owner shouted, then turned sharply and walked away, leaving Han standing there, frozen in silence. Grandma Min remained quiet, her sorrowful eyes filled with concern, yet she dared not say a word. Her frail hands clutched the small loaf of bread tightly, as if letting go would make it disappear along with the harsh words that had just been spoken. That night, back in her tiny rented room, Han sat motionless on her old, creaky bed. The dim yellow light flickered weakly, unable to chase away the heaviness in her heart. Tears streamed silently down her face, falling drop by drop onto the hands clutching her pillow. "Did I do something wrong? I was just trying to help someone less fortunate than me," she murmured, her voice trembling. She wondered, was it because I'm poor that even kindness has become a crime? Her eyes drifted to the old wooden table where a faded family photo rested. Her mother's gentle face, her little sister's innocent eyes. They seemed to remind her why she endured everything. But more than that, she felt she had to keep going. For Grandma Min, for the way her eyes softened when receiving the small meal, for the trembling yet sincere words of gratitude. After a long night of contemplation, Han made a decision. The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. In the dim morning light, Han carefully prepared the food at home, wrapping it meticulously before placing it into her bag. Instead of taking the usual route, she chose to go through a different alley, quietly making her way to the familiar street corner before the coffee shop owner arrived. As Han placed the food down, Grandma Min let out a soft sigh, her eyes filled with guilt. "Child, don't trouble yourself because of me, all right? I'm not worth you getting into trouble like this." Han smiled, her gaze gentle yet resolute. "Don't worry, Grandma. I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing it because I want to. As long as you stay healthy, nothing else matters." Grandma Min sat in silence, her frail hands clutching the warm packet of sticky rice that Han had just given her. She didn't say another word, but in that moment, her eyes carried a deep gratitude that words could never express. In the days that followed, Han continued with her work, but she became more cautious, always finding ways to avoid her boss discovering the truth. She dedicated her earliest mornings to bringing food to Grandma Min, and every time she saw her eating heartily, a sense of peace settled in her heart. Amidst the exhausting days, this small act of kindness felt like a flame keeping her heart warm, even though she knew the road ahead was still full of challenges. Han felt that as long as Grandma Min was still there, as long as kindness still existed, her simple life would always hold profound meaning. That morning, the bitterly cold winter wind weaved through the streets, carrying a chill that cut through to the bone. Han quickened her pace, carefully cradling the warm meal she had woken up early to prepare. The meal was simple, just plain rice with braised meat, but it was wrapped with care. She hoped it would bring Grandma Min some warmth on this freezing day. But as she neared the familiar street corner, she sensed that something was wrong. The spot where Grandma Min used to sit, leaning against the old utility pole, was now empty and eerily silent. The worn-out basket, the thin scarf, anything that belonged to her, was gone. Han froze, her eyes darting around anxiously, searching for the familiar figure amidst the rushing crowd, but all she found was the cold indifference of the bustling city streets. A growing sense of worry gripped her heart. Where is Grandma Min? Has something happened to her? The thought sent a wave of panic through her. Without hesitation, she hurried toward a small roadside stall nearby, one where Grandma Min would sometimes take shelter from the rain. "Ma'am, do you know where the old lady who usually sits at that corner has gone?" Han asked, her voice trembling, whether from the cold or something else she wasn't sure. The old woman selling tea looked up, her eyes tinged with sadness. "Poor Grandma. Last night was too cold. She collapsed right there. I heard an ambulance came to take her, but who knows where they took her. She probably couldn't bear the cold anymore." Han stood frozen, still holding the warm meal in her hands, yet she could no longer feel its warmth. Her heart grew heavy, as if a boulder had just been placed upon it, her eyes fixated on the empty spot where Grandma Min used to sit. In her mind, she could still picture that frail figure, curled up against the biting cold, her trembling hands clutching the woolen scarf Han had given her. If only I had come earlier. If only I could have done more for her. That entire day, Han worked in a daze. Her hands still brewed coffee, still wiped down tables, but her mind was lost in the emptiness of that street corner. Every time someone's gaze passed over her, she thought of Grandma Min, of her gentle yet sorrowful eyes whenever she accepted the meal from her hands. Han wondered, where is she now? Is she being taken care of properly, or is she suffering alone somewhere far away? In the days that followed, even though Grandma Min no longer appeared, Han continued to bring an extra meal each morning. Before starting her shift, Han quietly walked to the old street corner, placed the meal down, and walked away. She didn't dare hope that someone would pick it up, but this act felt like a way to hold on to something of Grandma Min in her life. Every time she passed by the empty street corner, she would glance over. She knew no one would be there, yet she couldn't stop hoping. She remembered every look, every word of gratitude from Grandma Min. She remembered those frail, trembling hands as they received the food. To Han, Grandma Min was not just an unfortunate old woman. She was someone who had taught her the meaning of compassion, of kindness in life. At night, Han sat in her small rented room, holding the woolen scarf that Grandma Min once used. She gently ran her fingers over the soft threads, feeling as if Grandma Min were still there, as if her words still echoed in her ears. "You are so kind. I don't even know how to thank you enough." The emptiness weighed heavier in her heart. Han wondered, where is she now? Is anyone taking care of her? Or is she still alone as she was before? Why has life been so unfair to her? These questions circled endlessly in her mind, unanswered. Yet, Han did not give up. Every day, she still returned to that street corner, carrying a fragile hope that one day, Grandma Min would come back, sit in her usual spot, and greet her with a gentle smile. And even if that day never came, Han still believed that what she had done, no matter how small, had brought Grandma Min some warmth during the coldest days of her life. Her heart felt heavy, but deep inside, she found a quiet comfort. At least, I did something for her, and no matter where she was, Han was certain that Grandma Min could still feel her kindness. One evening, as the last customers had just left, Han busied herself cleaning the cafe as usual. Her hands moved swiftly, wiping down the polished wooden tables, but her mind wandered, lost in thoughts of Grandma Min. Day by day, the image of her remained vivid in Han's heart, tightening her chest every time she thought about the empty street corner where Grandma Min once sat. As she pushed the last chair into place, a stranger walked in. He was dressed in a neatly pressed suit, his face kind, yet his eyes carrying a solemn weight. "You're Han, aren't you?" he asked, his voice warm yet urgent. Han, startled, placed the cleaning cloth down and nodded. "Yes, that's me. Is something wrong, sir?" The man gave her a small smile and handed her an envelope. "Grandma Min asked me to give this to you." Grandma Min? The mention of that name made Han freeze. Her hands trembled as she took the envelope, her heart pounding as she carefully opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with a short, simple, yet deeply meaningful message. "Thank you. Wait." Below it was an address leading to a small house in the outskirts. Han stared at the piece of paper, her heart filled with both confusion and curiosity. She looked up, but the man had already disappeared, leaving her standing there with countless unanswered questions. That evening, in her small rented room, Han sat in silence, staring at the note in her hand. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. What was Grandma Min trying to say? What did this house have to do with her? Was she still okay? The question spun endlessly in her head. After much hesitation, she decided that the next day, she would find that address. The next morning, Han left the cafe earlier than usual. She took a bus following the exact address written in the letter. The road leading to the small house was eerily peaceful, lined with lush green trees on both sides. The crisp, fresh air of the countryside brought a strange sense of calm. When she arrived, she was surprised by the sight before her. A small, but tidy and well-kept house. The iron gate was slightly open, as if it had been waiting for her to step inside. As she entered the yard, she was met by a man dressed in a neat suit, his face kind and gentle. He invited her in and introduced himself. "I am Grandma Min's lawyer, lawyer. She asked me to meet you and tell you her story." His voice was warm and measured, as if ensuring each word would sink deeply into the listener's heart. Han sat quietly, listening intently. The lawyer recounted that Grandma Min had once been a literature teacher, living a fulfilled life and earning the respect of many. But tragedy struck when her own son deceived her and took everything she owned. Betrayed by her own flesh and blood, Grandma Min was left destitute, forced to wander the streets. The lawyer paused for a moment, his gaze softening as he looked at Han. The days Grandma Min sat on that street corner were the darkest days of her life. She once believed she had no one left to rely on, no reason to keep living. But then you came, bringing small meals, kind words, and a kindness you didn't even realize you possessed. You saved her from despair. Han lowered her head, her eyes welling with tears. She never imagined that her small gestures could have such a profound impact. The lawyer smiled and continued. After being found and cared for by a charity organization, Grandma Min regained her health. She wanted to send you her deepest gratitude, not just for the meals, but for helping her restore her faith in life. And that is more precious than anything else. Hearing this, emotions surged within Han. She softly asked, "Grandma, how is she now? Is she doing well?" The lawyer nodded. "Grandma Min is recovering well and living in a safe place. She wanted to send you this message because she truly believes that without you, she wouldn't have made it through those darkest days." As Han left the small house, her heart felt heavy, yet filled with hope. Han realized that even the smallest acts of kindness could create miracles beyond imagination. And from this moment on, she knew she would live with a more open heart, for Grandma Min had taught her a precious lesson. That every act of kindness, no matter how small, could change a life. Sitting in the tidy little living room, the soft morning sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow. Han felt overwhelmed as she listened to the lawyer carefully explain. Before her was a thick stack of legal documents. Inside were the ownership papers for a small house in the countryside and a substantial savings account. "This is the gift Grandma Min wished to leave for you," the lawyer said, his voice calm yet warm. "She said that you didn't just help her through the darkest days, but you also made her feel like she still had a family." Han looked up, her eyes red and brimming with tears. "But I can't accept this. I only did what anyone else would have done," she murmured, her voice trembling, feeling unworthy of such an immense gift. The lawyer smiled gently, his eyes filled with understanding. Grandma Min thought long and hard before making this decision. This is not a repayment, it is her way of saying thank you. She said that you are the family she found again, the only person who treated her with genuine kindness, something she had not received from anyone else for many years. Those words tightened something in Han's heart. She lowered her head in silence, feeling each word sink deep into her soul. Grandma Min had once lived in the darkness of pain and betrayal, yet her small act of kindness had brought light back into her life. Han didn't know whether to feel happy or sad. That entire night, she lay awake in her tiny rented room. She gazed at the family photo on her desk, then at the woolen scarf Grandma Min once used, one she had kept carefully. Her tangled thoughts kept her from sleeping. Should I accept this? I only did something simple. Do I really deserve such a great reward? But then she thought of her aging parents back home, of her little sister studying tirelessly every night so she wouldn't disappoint them. She realized that this gift was not just an opportunity for her, it was a way to provide a better life for those she loved. The next morning, Han returned to meet the lawyer. Her eyes were still shadowed with exhaustion from a sleepless night. "I accept this gift," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "Not for myself, but for my family. I want my parents and my sister to have a better life." The lawyer nodded, a satisfied smile appearing on his face. "Grandma Min would be very happy to know you've made this decision. She always said that as long as you live happily, she will be at peace." After that, Han's life turned to a new chapter. The small house in the countryside had now become a warm home for her entire family. Her parents, after years of hard labor in the rural fields, finally had a peaceful place to rest. Her mother, a woman who had spent her whole life working tirelessly for her children, welled up with tears as she stepped into their new home. "My daughter, you are incredible. I never thought I would ever live in a place like this," she said, her voice choked with emotion. Han's younger sister now had the opportunity to study in better conditions, free from worries about tuition fees or financial struggles. Every evening, the family gathered in the small kitchen, their laughter and conversations filling the space with warmth, washing away the hardships of the past. As for Han, even though her life had become more stable, she never forgot the lessons from Grandma Min. Each morning, she would look at the old woolen scarf that Grandma Min once used, as a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness could change a life. And it was Grandma Min who had changed her life, not just with a material gift, but with the belief that when we live with sincerity, miracles will always find their way to us in the most unexpected ways. On the day her family moved into their new home, the sky seemed to celebrate their joy. The golden sunlight gently embraced every tree in the small garden. A cool breeze rustled through the blooming flowers, as if welcoming the new owners to the house. Standing before the iron gate, key in hand, Han felt a wave of emotion wash over her, both excitement and deep sentiment. Han turned to look at her parents and younger sister. Everyone had paused, their eyes sparkling with joy. She slowly turned the key. The soft click echoed gently, yet it seemed to resonate deep within their hearts. As the door swung open, sunlight poured in, illuminating the small yet cozy space inside. Her mother, frail and thin, stood frozen, her trembling hands clutching the edge of her shirt. Her eyes wandered around the house, from the spotless walls and gleaming floors to the simple yet neatly arranged furniture. She slowly stepped into the kitchen, where a brand new gas stove sat neatly beside a small wooden cabinet. She reached out, gently running her fingers over the surface of the stove, then turned to look at Han, her eyes welling with tears. "My child, I never thought I would live in a house like this. My whole life, I never even dared to dream of a peaceful, warm home like this." Han smiled, her own eyes glistening with emotion. She stepped forward, took her mother's hands, and whispered with quiet pride, "Mom, this is our home. From now on, you don't have to worry anymore. I will do my best to keep our family happy." Her father, a man of few words, could no longer hide his emotions. He stood silently at the doorway, his gaze distant. His calloused hand gently squeezed Han's shoulder, as if wanting to say thank you, but not knowing how to put it into words. "You did well." Her father spoke briefly, but his deep, warm voice carried a profound sense of pride. Han's younger sister, unable to contain her excitement, ran through the house, her little feet skipping eagerly as she explored every corner. "Sister Han, this room is mine, right? I'll put my study desk here and plant some flowers by the window." Her cheerful voice made the whole family burst into laughter. That entire afternoon, they worked together to arrange everything. Her mother carefully cleaned the kitchen, placing each pot and pan neatly in its place. Her father meticulously adjusted the wooden dining table and chairs, his calloused hands gently running over the wood, as if feeling the warmth of their new home. Meanwhile, Han and her sister were busy decorating their own rooms. Laughter and chatter filled the house. As the sun set, its golden light slowly faded over the small garden. The family gathered around the dining table, sharing their first meal in the new home. It was a simple meal, yet it carried immeasurable joy. The warm glow of the light cast soft shadows on their faces. Every smile, every glance filled with love. Han sat in silence, watching her family, her heart overflowing with contentment. She thought back to the difficult days, the night she lay awake in her cramped rented room, wondering if she had the strength to change their lives. And now, looking at her mother's radiant smile, her father's gentle gaze, and her sister's bright laughter, she knew every effort, every sacrifice had been worth it. When everyone had gone to sleep, Han sat by the window, her eyes drifting toward the starry sky. In her hands was the woolen scarf Grandma Min once used, still holding traces of warmth. Each day, Han smiled softly, remembering the woman who had taught her the most valuable lesson in life, that even the smallest acts of kindness could create miracles. Grandma Min had not only changed her own life, but had also transformed Han's. From a simple girl with modest dreams, Han now had a real home, a reunited family, and a future filled with possibilities. But what she cherished most was the profound lesson Grandma Min had left behind: to live with sincerity and never stop believing in the power of kindness. Outside, the gentle breeze rustled the flowers in the garden. Han took a deep breath, embracing the serene beauty of her new life. She knew that although the road ahead would still hold challenges, with her family by her side and the fire of compassion in her heart, she could overcome anything. And in that moment, she silently thanked life, thanked Grandma Min for helping her write a beautiful story of humanity, kindness, and unwavering hope. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our story. Through this story, we hope you have felt the power of kindness, the beauty of sharing, and the strength of believing in the good in life. The lesson we wish to share is this: no matter how small, acts of kindness, when given from the heart, can create miracles, changing not only someone else's life, but also our own. If this story has touched your heart, please support our channel by clicking like, leaving a comment below, and subscribing. Your support is the motivation for us to continue bringing meaningful and inspiring stories. Thank you sincerely, and we wish you health and happiness.